Hello everyone, welcome to this product manager resume roast. Today we are for a deep dive into a product manager resume. We're giving some really critical feedback, really specific points that you can take and apply to your own resume and start getting those callbacks from FANG, from the top tech companies, or wherever it is that you're applying to for a product manager role. Candace, thanks so much for joining us. Give people a quick intro into who you are and in your background with resumes.
Well, my name is Candace Barr, and I was an executive recruiter for many years, but for the last 14, I have been writing executive resumes, LinkedIn profiles, and helping executives run a networking-based job search. I work pretty extensively in tech, so I end up working with a lot of technology professionals, product owners, product managers, and help them get their foot in the door.
Right, let's crack on to the resume in question. We're calling him Paul Patani. It's not his real name. This is an anonymized version. But yeah, he's got many years of relevant experience. He's been using this resume to apply for product manager jobs and not really getting anywhere. So Candace, can you help him out?
Absolutely. So the first thing I'm always looking at when I redesign a resume is how do we help you stand out? If they're looking at 50 or 100 other people with similar backgrounds, why should they contact Paul? Right? So the first thing that I see with this is his summary is just a little generic. It doesn't really tell me who he is and what value he brings to the table. Everyone's a little bit different, so it's going to depend on his specific background. Has he worked for some of the world's most innovative technology organizations? You know, who are these companies that he's worked for, and what has he done? So I would probably start by putting a title up top. You could leave off that summary piece. You know, that section doesn't really need to be labeled. And I would put his target roles up at the top. Technical product and project manager, something like that. And then I would work on making his summary less generic and much more specific. What value does he bring? You know, when we go down and we'll do this and we look a little bit more into his actual career experience, he has put some of these processes in place. He's installed the Agile and Scrum processes, right? So to me, it's a little bit weak to just say managing these projects when he's actually been a big part of putting stronger governance and processes in place to make these things better. So I would start by reworking this summary to really show that. And in a resume, it's always so much more powerful if you can quantify and put metrics with it. So when he's talking about organizational wide agile transformations, that's great, but I would love to see some scope here. Were they global? How, what was the size? Has he led transformations impacting, 3,000 end users, right? I would like to see a little bit more scope. And here's what I'm telling everybody, the company doesn't really care so much about your soft skills. And a lot of this stuff is subjective. Leadership, organization, and communication skills just doesn't say a ton to me. What specifically has he been able to do? Is Paul great at taking some of these over budget, off track projects and putting them back on track? That's going to speak and resonate a lot stronger with the audience than just communication skills, which, to be honest, everyone says they have, and they may or may not.
Right. That's really interesting to me. So actually, would you say the resume is the place where you're mainly trying to demonstrate hard skills, and obviously soft skills are very important in your role, but maybe the interview is the place that you have to demonstrate those.
Or possibly LinkedIn. LinkedIn can be a great place to write in first person and talk a little bit more about what makes you tick, what your leadership style is. And we can have some of that on the resume, but I really like to take that show, don't tell approach. So instead of saying, I'm a great communicator, let's go down, let's hit the hardest points up in the summary, the stuff that's really going to resonate, right? You're marketing yourself. Why are you different? What helps you stand out? Say something different than everybody else. And then down in the experience, those soft skills are important, but you can show them in a bullet point, maybe talking about how you brought these siloed teams together and improved communication, and then you were able to deliver projects 6 months faster than they were before, right? Show, don't tell.
Yeah. I like that as a motto for resume, show, don't tell.
And,
okay.
And then obviously proofreading and then proofreading again is great because there's a typo in this last sentence, bridging large teams. It's large T's and it needs to be teams. So hit home the point of proofread and have someone else proofread behind you and then proofread again. When we go down into his career experience, I like to do some things so that the person reading this doesn't have to go do a lot of research. So typically under the company name, I like to have like a little one-line blurb about who the company is. Now, obviously, if you've been working for Google or something like that, everyone's going to know, but it can still be really impressive to just give a little blurb about this is one of the largest technology organizations in the world with, 1 billion revenue and 50,000 employees, something like that, right? Don't make them, and this is especially important if it's not as recognizable of a company or name, help them out. Don't make them have to go Google and figure out who you're working for, right? So that's just an easy way that doesn't take up much space on the resume. And then another strategy that I like to do for readability is underneath each role, I like to put a little bit of easy scope information. So what are the relevant metrics for this role? What's your budget? How many direct and indirect reports did you have? What's the P&L? The relevant metrics are going to change for everybody. But typically under that product manager title, I would like to show the scope of the role with just some quick figures. And
Okay,
you can do that under every title. And then without having to say much, they can quickly see your career progression and how your responsibility has increased, right?
Yeah.
It also helps quickly qualify people because, resumes are scanned. They're not going to sit here and read the whole thing word for word, potentially ever. They're looking very quickly to see, okay, is this someone we need to talk to that's qualified for the role? So having that scope information where they don't have to dig for it in the bullet points really helps them see the level of operation and quickly determine qualified or unqualified.
That's a really interesting point that I hadn't seen anyone talk about before. That's great. Thanks, Candace.
Yeah, no problem. And, little things like that you can do can really help you stand out because everyone's not doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And making your life easier as a recruiter, which is always good, right?
Absolutely. Make it easy for them. That's what I tell everyone. Like, don't assume they're going to connect the dots for them. And then, there's lots of different ways that you can format and handle your experience. But what I like to do is I like to have one summary paragraph, or you can even do one summary bullet point, but I like to have it in a paragraph and then bullet out some bullet points below that paragraph. I like for that first paragraph to be a just general description of the duties and responsibilities, kind of like what Paul's done here in the first bullet point, where he's overseeing the agile teams. Again, it's going to be important somewhere in here to have the scope information. Whether he puts that directly below his product manager title or whether he puts it in the bullet point, how large are these teams? Who is he leading? That's very important information. So, we need to have that scope in here. But I typically like to have one bullet point that's going to really talk about the overall duties and responsibilities of the role. It's also important to note if he was either recruited or promoted into this role. I'll usually start the paragraph with that, recruited to oversee technology agile teams, right? Like get that information in there. It's important. And then I really like for the bullet points to be achievements that you want to be talking points in the interview, right? I like for the bulk of these bullet points to be results-driven achievements and the specific things that are going to lead into these people telling the stories they want to tell in the interview to sell their value, right? So every bullet point really needs to hit home and be one of your proudest accomplishments. Okay. And one of the things that Paul has done well in here is that he has quantified some of his results, which is one of the biggest mistakes I see people making. They don't quantify. So he's got that. But I like, taking a look at this second bullet point where he talks about leading the ideation, research, development, change management, training, and launch of a custom mobile application nationwide. I get what he's trying to say, but I don't think that really shows the power of the fact that he has launched a nationwide mobile app. So I would rework the wording to lead with that mobile application so they don't have to dig deeper in the bullet point for it. So I would say something like led end-to-end development and launch of a nationwide custom mobile application. And then we can talk about some of those specific, the creation, the research, all of that, and then put the metrics at the end. And he did a good thing there. I just would just reword it a little bit to make it a little bit more powerful and impactful. You kind of, when I'm rewriting bullet points, you kind of want to lead and end, like begin and end with your most powerful things so that people don't have to dig into the middle of the bullet point for it. And you can even do some stuff like a lot of times I'll bold and italicize the initial important, information, which is developing and launching this nationwide mobile app, right? I would probably put that in the front, bold and italicize it, have in the middle of the bullet point kind of what he did, and then end it with those results. 2.5 million in savings and reduced time to train associates by 80% in 6 months. And I would probably
Great.
bold and italicize that as well. You want to kind of draw the eye to that key information. Another good tip is you can make the resume a little bit more readable. If anywhere he's spelled out numbers like 6, you can just put the number in and type in the number 6, and it might be a little bit more readable. One of the things that I do with people in my sessions is, I say, okay, like, tell me what you did with this launch. What are you proud of? What do you want to be able to talk about in the interview? What's your point in including this? And almost always people start giving me information that's really, really relevant and tells more of their story. You want to be less generic and more specific. So it's like, everyone's story is different, but if they put Paul on this to get this over budget project back on track, he needs to tell that story. He was tapped to come turn around this, failing project. And what did he do? You know what I mean? And so we want to kind of be more specific and tell more of the story. These people don't care so much that he's able about the research, the change, as much as they do getting in there and getting the results done.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So, I think with each one of these bullet points, we could do that, right? He reduced their deployment timelines by up to 90%, which is a lot. So I think that this could be a more powerful story, like what was happening beforehand? Were they missing these deadlines significantly? Was it costing clients, costing money? I would probably make that more powerful and talk about how he really solved a big problem for them, which is what that looks like that probably was, but it just doesn't convey it in the wording. These large implementations are very important. So, like this custom Salesforce application. Again, I think that we need to retool this bullet point to talk more about the fact that this was innovative. It looks like, I might, instead of spearheaded, use something like pioneered, the first implementation. And instead of saying built with LWC, which I don't think is super powerful information that they're going to necessarily care about, like we can cover specific softwares in the tools and skills section. I would talk more about like what he was brought on to do. What were they using before? Especially with these custom Salesforce, there's usually a lot of like dashboard development, custom reporting. It connects with other CRMs, right? And I might talk a little bit about, there's a decrease in efficiency, but I think we could probably tell more of that story. It probably helped the sales team expedite their turnaround for quoting, lots of things like that. So I think I would probably talk with him and learn a little bit more about, okay, what was the problem that this implementation solved? What was the innovations? And let's retell this in a little bit more powerful way. Because you want these companies to be able to see you coming over and doing these things for them and solving their problems, right? Maybe their CRM doesn't integrate and it's a mess. So I think we could make that a little bit more specific, and also a little bit more information on 16 national markets. I think that's probably a pretty big deal, but the resume doesn't really convey the scope. So I would love to know more about how many people that involved, what was maybe the sales revenue across those 16 markets that this was impacting.
Okay.
Something to really show the size and scope of how important this was.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, even more specific with the metrics there.
The more specific you can get, the better. And really try to tell your story. To me, so many of these resumes just look like they all look the same. It looks like AI wrote it, talking about implementation, blah, blah, blah. And you can really stand out if you change that and tell more of your story. What were you brought in to fix? What did you do to fix it? What was the positive end result? Right?
Great.
And so, looking down at this next company as the manager of technology delivery, again, we're going to want to do the same thing, have a quick one line about who the company is. And then some scope information to show the level of his role. Again, he's got it in here in the bullet points, but you've got to read all of them to gather it. So make it easy. Put that 4 million portfolio budget, and all of that, and have that easy to read. I would love to know about him facilitating the agile transformation, because to me, this sounds a little bit weak in that, did he lead this? Was he part of a team? And it sounds like he actually created and implemented these workflows and processes, So I think that this bullet point needs to be expanded a little bit to talk about the fact that he put some of these probably first official policies into place. And again, talk a little bit more about what did that do? What was in place before, and what did putting these things in place involve? If there was large scope involved, that needs to be included as well. Was this done globally? A lot of times people will do something within their area of control or their department, and then it's so successful that it's adopted and rolled out nationwide or rolled out globally. And those are the little things that people forget or don't think about putting in here that can have a huge impact, right? So you could talk about, like, he created these workflows and processes that were then adopted across the organization, or whatever that is.
Yeah, I think that's interesting for people to bear in mind. So he's put this at the top. It's clearly something that was very impactful. And often when you're writing it, obviously your own story, and so it can seem like it's obvious to you why it's important, but to the recruiter who's just reading it very quickly, the way he's done it, it doesn't really, it doesn't convey the impact and the importance of what he actually did.
Exactly.
So,
and don't be afraid to be a little bit
point.
bold, right? Like you're marketing yourself. So go ahead and use some strong language, pioneered, innovated, led end-to-end development, you use some of that higher level language that really shows the scope and impact of what you did. People are, I think, sometimes a little hesitant to talk about themselves like that. It's a little uncomfortable. It feels a little bit like bragging, but you have to brag a little bit in a good resume. Again, he led these cross-functional teams as a Scrum Master, which I think is important. But I probably, instead of talking about leveraging the Scrum framework, I think that's kind of obvious, as you're a Scrum Master and leading these teams, I would talk a little bit more about, like, what talking points does he want to talk to in the interview? Did he have to go in and really build teams? Did he have to revamp the team, maybe get rid of some people and hire some, move people where they're going to flourish? Tell a little bit more of the story about this team leadership and what he was able to do. A lot of times in these roles, communication is a problem. Keeping everybody on the same page and keeping these projects moving forward is important. So I'll talk specifically about, like, what the person has done. Sometimes they institute town halls, weekly check-ins. Sometimes they enable, some custom dashboards or reporting so that there's real-time access to project status, right? So I would probably just add a little bit more, instead of this generic Scrum stuff, about what did he do as a team leader to really improve communication, team building, and get all of this stuff moving forward and developed on time. And everyone's story is a little bit different, but talk about what you did specifically. And again, you're always wanting to lead into the stories that you want to tell in the interview to sell your value. So, he wants, if he was able to kind of lead a turnaround or make these teams more functional, we need to tell more of that story.
I think that's an important point for product managers. I think they often have seen a lot of resumes where they put Scrum Master, and they think just by having the word there, then that's telling the story almost by itself. And
it doesn't. And I mean, it does say some things. I'm going to assume the reader understands what a Scrum Master is, but you want to just make it a little bit more powerful and custom to you, a little bit less generic. What were the issues in the company, and what did putting these policies in place do, I think that budget, that budget bullet point is fine. But again, if there's anything specific that he was able to do with the budget, we want to highlight that there. Did he consistently come in under budget? That's important. We need to put that in there. Was he able to build the business case and earn buy-in for additional budget funds? That needs to be in there, right? So I might expand that just a little bit to talk a little bit more specifically about what his budget involvement was, and maybe throw an achievement in there if we can. Bullet point below that is also very important. Customer client facing experience always needs to be highlighted. Not all super tech minded people are great with clients.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, that's a soft skill, but that is very important. And if they've been successfully customer facing to the point where they're able to secure and help, it's really sales enablement in these roles. That needs to be prominently highlighted. And I almost sometimes say something like extensive sales enablement, experience, and maybe talk about how did he generate this 1.5 million of revenue within the first year. It sounds like he probably gathered feedback, saw where there were some gaps or a product could be developed to better meet and align to the needs of the customer, and then it sounds like developed it and monetized it. So to me, that bullet point just doesn't come close to conveying what he actually did. And I think we could tell a little bit more of the story there. I don't like to go, the more senior you go in your career, the less I like to focus on specific technologies and tools. We definitely need to list a few key ones. They're probably going to be covered in the career experience, but we also don't want to make you look too junior. For a lot of these roles, they're not going to care so much that you know how to code or whatever it is. They want to know that you can lead the teams that can do this. So I tell people, keep this very concise and very, very relevant to the organizations. For these types of roles, a lot of times they're going to want someone with Salesforce expertise, right? So sometimes instead of just a huge laundry list of all these different technologies, we can really highlight like his specific expertise in these technologies that are really going to matter. Say he's applying for roles that want a Salesforce expert. He can list Salesforce and then list the implementations, the custom dashboards, like all of that deep experience. To me, that's going to resonate with a company better than just like Microsoft Office. Like take that out. Sure. Everybody can work Office, right?
Sure. So maybe that might mean a little bit more work, having various versions of your resume, but adapt the skills section for each role that you're applying for.
Make sure that it's targeted. And, if they're wanting someone with really deep Salesforce experience and you have it, don't assume that just listing Salesforce and the skills and tools is going to convey that. Give them a quick little blurb, 10 years of custom implementation experience or whatever, developing custom dashboards globally. Like it's okay to spend a little bit of time and show where your expertise is there. But otherwise, Great. I think it's important to have, I typically, in my resumes, like to have, I like to up top underneath the summary, I'll have kind of an executive strengths or a skills section. And that's where I'm going to list, and that's really great for readability because if someone's scanning this right on page 1 up there at the top, you want your core, like maybe 15 to 20 top skills, and they need to be your most powerful ones. And I usually like to have that separated out and up here towards the top. And then I'll have technology and tools kind of in its own section down at the bottom, down towards the end of the resume like he's done here. So I would almost, recommend separating out skills and tools and, keeping technology tools, just technology focused, very specific to what these companies are looking for. Don't do anything that's irrelevant, out of date, keep it concise. And then I would have your strongest kind of skills up top on page 1. And then education and certifications is fine. I think that's formatted correctly to be read pretty well. And I think there isn't probably much that I would change there. You don't necessarily need to have the dates for your certifications and their expiration, but it doesn't really hurt it to have it on there. Note that if someone is worried about age discrimination, this is a younger guy, so it's not an issue. But as people age, and especially in technology, age discrimination is an issue. So I usually reach a point where I leave dates off of education and certifications because, again, marketing piece, you want to get your foot in the door. You don't want them to make any assumptions about your age, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Great.
I think that about summarizes this one.
Excellent. That's been a really useful deep dive. If Paul sees this, then he's had a great session for free. But I think any product manager seeing this, especially ones who are maybe in a similar position to Paul, they've had a few years experience and then not quite managing to get those callbacks from the top companies. I think that's going to be a really, really useful deep dive there. So yeah, Candace, thanks very much. And yeah, we'd love to do this again with you soon.
All right, you're welcome.